the internet. We are all nations with a common purpose, and by joining together, we gain economies of scale that reduce the cost for each of our countries. We have learned a lot about how important it is to join together and confront problems, and of course, pursue opportunities. A regional broadband network will help us unite even more by giving us greater ability to share information among governments, among our universities, businesses, civil society, groups, and individuals. But you are here today because you know that it isn't just a matter of signing a contract with a company to begin erecting towers. We will have to decide on a regulatory regime. In fact, we will have to make some very basic decisions about the role of government and the level of government regulation. We will have to look at questions of accessibility and computer literacy, because the best technology is useless if it's beyond the capacity of our citizens. We know that children today seem to have a sixth sense for using technology. My niece is one of those prime examples. So we need to be sure that we are giving them enough exposure in our schools. And we can't forget the adults either. We have to take a serious look at cybersecurity, which is a growing threat. Businesses and governments fend off millions of attempts to breach systems every single year, and it's growing. If we are going to provide the advantages of technology to our citizens, we have to protect them from the abuse of it, from the thieves who would steal their most valuable personal information or disable systems that people depend on. And there is a question of capacity building. We certainly rely heavily on the private sector, on firms from outside the region, but we want to be sure that we are educating and training local technicians and managers who can build and upgrade the system and, most importantly, keep it functioning. And of course, we have to build the capacity of our very own citizens. We know this is a lot of work, and this is why we will be having these meetings here in Fiji over the course of the next 3 years. Our government is proud to host these meetings, and we are proud to offer leaderships for future developments. Our central location, size, and infrastructure make Fiji the logical hub for the region, and we are truly excited to be part of this undertaking. Multilateral diplomacy can be very slow and a tedious process, but we do not believe this is what we are embarking on. As a region, as a group of nations, we are unified in purpose. We face similar challenges and shared aspirations. In other words, we know what we want, and we are determined to see it done. We see the possibilities over the horizon. Our next step is to map our way. We wish you a successful and productive meeting, and on behalf of the Minister, Vinaka Vakalevu, and welcome again to Fiji.
Thank you. May I ask the Madam Permanent Secretary to remain standing to receive a token of appreciation from Mr. Yamada, Secretary General of APT. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in showing our appreciation to our guest speakers in officiating this forum. This now concludes the opening ceremony. We are now required to assemble at the foyer for the group photo. Thank you, and Vinaka.
Yeah. Yes, about 5 o'clock. Yeah, so yes, 5 is coming from Korea, so that's why we had a little hiccup. Yeah, yeah. So we were trying to time it, but it didn't work, yes. Anyway.
Please make your way outside, just at the front, at the main foyer. The photographer and everyone is waiting. Thanks.
Yes, yes. It's peak season, so we should be end of the year, or we can really contribute to the hotels. It's also helpful to have tourism under the same industry. So, good morning. Certainly.
And we have a working group of about 7 or 8 people who have started work on this. Policy Objective C, this is for member countries to look at. And so once again, I encourage you to think about this carefully when you go back for next year. Also on C, 2.1, member countries are encouraged to establish regulators that adapt to convergence of telecom. And those that were here last year heard a very good presentation from Samoa, from Donny, explaining how he's been asked to convert only for telecommunications and what's commonly known as broadcasting, but even water. So his activities has certainly expanded. And 2.2 is also for member countries' implementation. Also on Policy Objective C, 4.2, this is APT to look at, and this is and also 4.2. Oh, sorry, 4.2 is in twice, and then 5.1. And we'll give a presentation later on in 5.1 on the international mobile roaming tariffs and costs reports that was done in APT earlier this year. Policy Objective D, 1.1, APT to consider providing means to facilitate regional cooperation on the strategy, which is the development of content and applications. Last year we had a meeting in Canberra in Australia to deal with this topic, and this year we're planning another meeting, but it's not confirmed at this stage. And then 2.1 is for member countries to action again, and 5.2 is member countries, and so 6.1. So please take note of these, because we actually sent out a questionnaire to countries earlier this year, and would anyone like to guess how many responses we've got? Thank you, Gizzy. Exactly 0 responses from the Pacific, so we need to do something about that. Then finally, for develop human resource capacity, the APT HRD program. APT runs approximately 20 plus training programs a year, and invitations are sent out to Pacific Island countries. And earlier this year, as I mentioned, we had a meeting in Bangkok, and it was quite a dynamic meeting, and we'll talk a bit more about that later on during the meeting. And then also one of the key ones, APT to study and implement online training program. So this was one of the action points of that particular meeting, and we'll hear a bit more about it then. So as I've mentioned, it's not confirmed, but there's a strong possibility of a ministerial meeting in 2013. It'll be a total Asia Pacific meeting, and as normal with the ministerial meetings, the ministers, each minister will be doing a presentation on their country's actions, so you can be expected to be asked. So it's a friendly warning to start some action to get this underway so that you're not caught embarrassed. And then formally from the meeting in the last session today, we want to consider how APT should implement the key strategies and actions. And tomorrow I'll give you a printout of those actions that we saw earlier this morning and on the slides, and so that you've got something to look at and to think about. Number 2, develop a realistic implementation schedule and timeline. This was instructions from the Management Committee, was that they want to see an implementation schedule and timeline, and also to add a results column. So for this meeting we don't need to add the results column, but for the MC meeting at the end of this year we will need to report on the results column. And then as I just mentioned, report to the MC on recommendations for possible implementation in 2013. So what we are really hoping for is from this meeting we'll get your ideas so that we can do the presentations do the presentations that you asked for and take the actions that you recommend for us to do in next year. So I know this has been quite a boring presentation and it's been hammered each time we have the Policy and Regulation Forum, but it's done by the it's what we're instructed to do, so it's something that we have to do. So with all of that, thank you very much, and I'm sure that the rest of the presentations will be not so boring as this particular topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Stu, for your explanation. So, as Stu mentioned, we may have the ministerial meeting next year, maybe the second half of the next year. So, as the minister adopted the action plan in 2009 and asked the member state to implement those action plans, so we have to report to the ministers next year. So now that we are implementing those action plans now, and your information on what you have achieved in relation to the relevant action plans in the Pacific, we need the information. That's why the Management Committee is asking us to report on the significant achievement on each action items in each country. So we will have another session in Thursday, Wednesday, and before that we will distribute paper to the participants so that you can give us some information. Any information is welcome. We still have some 1 year to implement, so some proposals is also welcome, but also we need some information on your achievement in relation to the broadband development in your country. So we would request you to think about this today and tomorrow. So thank you. So we have a second speaker. So there is some new developments going on in countries like Palau and Tonga, especially in the field of backbone network for the broadband, especially the fiber optic submarine cable. So we have a speaker from Tonga Cable